Samurai Battles! This is a new implementation of the modern classic system commands and colors, and as the title says, we are now in feudal Japan, and so we have several battles. What am I talking about? 40 battle scenarios, a lot of value right there. This is a game mainly for 2 players, but you can definitely play solitaire by controlling both sides at the best of your possibilities, and this is how I played the game. So, the board will look familiar to anybody who has played any commands and colors game before. The board is pretty much blank, but then you have a healthy amount of terrain tiles that will allow you to create different types of landscapes based on the scenario. This is a block war game, although not in the traditional Columbia block war games in which one side of the block is blank and the other one has a sticker to create fog of war. Here there is perfect information about the position and identity of the unit, so each sticker needs to be stickered twice. You're gonna be in stickering jail for quite a while as you sticker all of those. It's annoying and boring. There's no other way of describing it. But then you got 40 scenarios to play, so hooray. And honestly, the visual effect of then having units represented by those blocks standing upright on the battle is pretty neat. It's pretty neat. Come on. And we have a lot of different units here, from really tough samurais and their leaders to peasants, to people with the arquebuses, if that's how you pronounce that thing, and so a lot of different things. Important elements, so is the art, of course, that tells you who is who, but then you also have this symbol here that represents the rank. Square is the highest rank, then we have the triangle, and then we have the green circle, which is the lowest. Then we have white symbols representing leaders. This is an infantry leader here. This is a cavalry leader. And again, the art is also important because it tells you about the weapon that the unit has, whether the unit has range attacks or not. Lots of important information there. Here we got some archers, here we got some spearmen, and so on and so forth. When a unit made of multiple blocks takes a hit, a block is removed. When the last block of the unit is removed, the unit is eliminated, and the opponent collects a flag. And this is the main way in which you score victory points. It works in every scenario, it works every time, but there may be also different ways of scoring points in different scenarios. Like other games in the system, the main idea is that you have a deck of command cards. You will have a hand of command cards. The number of cards that you get depends on the scenario. When you play a card, it simply tells you which units activate. Sometimes the activation is based on the position of the units in one of the 3 areas of the board. Left flank, center, or right flank, as indicated by these dotted lines here. Some of the times you have different ways of activating units, but the idea remains that when it is your turn, you'll play a card that tells you which units activate, and the units that activate can move and or battle depending on different restrictions. There are units that can move full movement allowance and then battle, units that if they move their full movement allowance don't battle. Luckily enough, you have a nice player right here that tells you the restrictions about that, how much they move, any restrictions about battling. And speaking about battle, there may be fire combat, and with different amounts, with a certain range and different amounts of dice. Then you have close combat, which of course is only when between units that are adjacent to each other. And then you have other restrictions that have to do with the units' protective capabilities. A lot of units are able to avoid damage or other game effects. When you attack a unit of the opponent, whether ranged or adjacent, the two systems vastly overlap. You're still going to look at the player aid and determine the number of dice that you roll. Modifiers will apply based on card play, based on other things that I'll tell you later, based on terrain. Let's say at the end we're going to roll 4 dice, and you have these like really nice, cool-looking custom dice. And you roll. Suppose that unit is attacking that unit that has a square. When you roll the symbol of the rank of the opponent, square versus square, circle versus circle, that's always a hit. That's pretty good. Swords may be hits under different circumstances if, for example, the opponent is unable to ignore them. Say a mounted unit can ignore a sword from a foot unit because of superior stature. Rank also counts, so that you can ignore a unit, you can ignore a hit from a unit immediately below you in rank. So a square can ignore a sword result from a triangle, and 2 sword results from a circle, and a triangle can ignore a sword result from a circle. Flags of this kind, they mean retreat. They may mean retreat unless the opponent is able to reduce that. And again, there are different game effects, such as the presence of leader, the presence of adjacent friendly units that will allow you to ignore retreats result. And this one is very important. Honor and fortune. You will collect these tokens that can be spent. Well, I'll talk about that later. The main idea still remains that you roll the dice, you apply results that are always applied, then you check out the other results whether or not specific game effects annul them, and if they are not annulled, you may apply extra or further step losses, and you may have to apply retreats. So those honor and fortune tokens, very important. When you retreat, it's shameful and dishonorable. Honor is a very important element in this game, so you have to pay a penalty in honor tokens. So you may want to have some of these. If you don't have enough to pay, you take a test by rolling dice, and you may lose further units. It's very bad. Speaking of losing units, leaders are particularly brittle in this game. In other Commands and Colors games, if a unit with a leader attached to it takes a hit, you roll 2 dice and the leader is eliminated. If both dice show swords, here you only roll 1 die. When a unit the leader is attached to takes a hit, there's a chance in 6 that the leader will go down. But back to the honor thing. So this is a currency that you use to pay for the shame of your retreats. And again, there are penalties if you don't have enough. Also, that's a currency that you use to use the effects of dragon cards. These are cards that allow you to trigger special effects, and that's pretty cool. The scenario instructions will tell you how many you start with. Here in the top left corner, you have the cost in terms of these tokens that you need to pay for, and some are free, good for you, but then so many are not. And so simply, when you want to play one of these cards, you pay the associated cost, you reveal the card, and you resolve the effect. A lot of different effects can come from this, and that, of course, adds a lot of tactical nuance right there. Interesting enough, then you also have another choice when it comes to the kind of resources, cards, and or these tokens. So you will collect these tokens when you roll those results, but also in other circumstances, and the circumstances where you don't. Meaning, say, if you're a very powerful cavalry unit and you're attacking peasants, that is dishonorable, at least it's not honorable, so you don't collect these tokens. At the end of the turn is when you're gonna get your more reliable source of tokens and or cards, because at the end of your turn, after you draw a new command card to replenish your hand, or I should say to replace the one that you played, after you do that, you have a choice of either collecting 2 honor and fortune tokens or draw a new dragon card. So interesting catch-22 there, because you collect a lot of these, well, I don't have a lot of cards to use it with. You collect a lot of these cards and you don't have the energy to power up their battery, to use a completely anachronistic simile. So this is in essence the idea. It's a simple game, but it does have a bit of fiddliness here and there because of the many different ways in which the units behave. And luckily enough, again, this player will be your best friend. Another best friend is gonna be the back of the rule book that shows you what kind of game effects are triggered in by different dice results in range combat and in close combat. Speaking of close combat, when you fight, if the opponent is dislodged from their location or eliminated, you can move in, advance after combat, as we call it in other games. In some cases, you may be able to, after advancing after combat, you may be able to launch another attack. But in close combat also, if after you fight, the opponent is still there, they get to battle back. It's a lot of bloody back and forth. Speaking again of the player rates, you also got the back of the scenario book with terrain, but that's not too much. When you're familiar with all the rest, adding the modifiers based on terrain is not too bad. Play turn after turn, playing command cards, possibly dragon cards, move, attack, resolve bloody combat, gain and lose honor, and continue like this turn after turn until one of the players has won by matching, by fulfilling the victory conditions of the scenario. This is a really good game. Now, I'm a big fan of the commands and colors system. I like almost every game that was released based on that system. I guess the one exception being Red Alert. But this one is one of the good ones. Actually may just even be one of the better ones. There is a bit of a limitation, but that's completely personal. It's just for me, which is I don't know pretty much anything about this period in history. So when I read the description of the scenarios, the situation, the clans, what they're trying to do, to me is all abstract. And that's, again, just entirely me. It just means that to me there is less of an emotional hook, less of an intellectual engagement when it comes to this game as opposed to games about Commands and Color Ancients or Commands and Colors Napoleonics. To me, honestly, if the game, instead of being about clan wars that I know nothing about, was about orcs and elves, it would almost feel the same. Again, it's just a limitation in me, not in the game at all. But maybe there are other people that are also not so familiar with this period. When it comes to the game itself, then it works. It's just impeccable. You have all the good stuff of the commands and color system, yet you have some unique flavor, yet you have some unique ideas that really make this not just a repeat of, say, Napoleonics or medieval. What you have here is, again, these blocks, pain in the neck to build, but definitely pleasant and fun to get that sense of almost like a miniature game on the battle. And you have 40 scenarios. That's a lot of value. That's a lot of gameplay. And I haven't played them all, but I played a few of them, and they definitely play differently with different combinations of units, from some earlier, smaller intro scenarios to some fairly epic stuff later on. Terrain playing different roles in different situations. So a lot of gameplay, a lot of variety there. Again, a lot of value. But what I like here is, well, to see an old friend, which is the commands and color system, an old friend that I've been hanging out with for a while and a lot of times in many different situations, and to see all the stuff that I like there. I really like the commands and color system. By now, maybe I don't need to either defend it or advocate for it. You should know all of the advantages, which is the variety of gameplay, the unpredictability, the incentives that it gives you to keep a balanced strategy, because if you commit all on one flank and then you don't get cards for that flank, well, too bad for you. Which early on, in the early days of the system, we heard people complaining, but that seems silly, too much luck. Maybe you shouldn't commit to all of your forces on a single flank. That just doesn't work so well. So once we became familiar with the system, we saw the advantages of keeping your options open, of having a flexible strategy, of being able to respond to the fact that you don't know exactly what cards you can get. But then here you also have, and to me that's when the system also really shines, this extra element of the dragon cards and the honor and fortune tokens. they really enhance gameplay by giving you more options, more things to do, and in a truly non-trivial way, because having to retreat and having to pay penalties because you did not save enough honor and fortune tokens, it's pretty bad, can be pretty devastating or catastrophic even. But at the same time, using some of those really cool bonuses at the right moment can really pay off. So the game gives you, on top of the usual dilemmas, when am I going to maneuver, who should attack whom, and should I push a certain attack or retreat, defend the group so they don't lose the last block and so I don't give a flag to the opponent. You have the usual battlefield decision that you have to make, plus this other element of budgeting your resources and yet finding when it's the right moment to be a squanderer and try to really benefit from that super mega awesome bonus. Again, it also feels very thematic, and after I told you I don't know much about the theme, the idea of the honor that is so important, of engaging with an honorable enemy that brings you glory by defeating that enemy, defeating somebody who is not your equal, is not quite as powerful. It feels very thematic, and again, I still contend that I don't know much about the historical background. It feels thematic based on samurai movies and video games that I play. So it resonates with me from that point of view. That's why I say the honor system resonates with me more than the historical background, because that's what I know, although again in that fictional way that I've been exposed to the topic. But generally speaking, you have a immense range of really fun battles. What is also interesting in the design is the vast range of different units that were so different from one another, and that just you have to operate differently if you are to have any hope. So for example, those mounted units are incredibly hard to take down. Well, unless you have another mounted unit, or you have units at least of equal rank, so that you're suffering only from the penalty based on statue. But then maybe you can figure things out again using some of those bonuses, using a massive optimization, exploiting terrain. So I like how the disparity between the units doesn't feel like the game is broken, just presents you with different ranges of challenges. It almost feels like some of those games about, a tank is coming and I don't have the right unit, so I need to figure how to use what I got in a way that still makes it, gives me some hope there. So a lot of interesting tactical problems that again come from the different range of units that move, fight, and especially take damage in so many different ways. Plus the command cards, plus the honor system, plus the dragon cards. You're gonna have a game system that has a lot of nuance, a lot of depth, and it's not too hard to grok. So I'm definitely happy with Commands and Colors Samurai Battles. Right now my shelf of Commands and Color games is starting to get pretty big and pretty crowded, but I'm not at a point where I'm like, I think I'm having enough. There is always room for one more Commands and Colors game, especially if it's one that is really good like this one is.